Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery video. This week I've got something a little bit different for you. It's not the standard mystery. I am venturing into the world of scientific psychological experiments. This isn't going to be something that I'm covering every single week, but maybe occasionally I might do something like this. I'm intrigued to know all your feedback, so let me know what you think. This week I wanted to talk about one of the most famous yet controversial psychological experiments of all time. You've probably heard of it, the Stanford prison experiment. This definitely looks into the darker side of human psychology and it's very, very interesting to learn about. I'd heard of it before, I knew about it, but there were a lot of things whilst researching it that I hadn't realised. This video is very much inspired by my friend Caitlin Rose here on YouTube. She covers a lot of these scientific experiment kind of things, and to be honest, she probably does it a little bit better than I do. So if you like this video, then definitely go and check out her channel. So I'll give you a general overview of the experiment to begin with. So the Stanford prison experiment ran for 6 days between the 14th and the 20th of August 1971, and it was ran by a Dr. Philip Zimbardo. It was a social psychology experiment that attempted to look at the psychological effects of perceived power. It focused particularly on the power struggle and the dynamics between prison guards and prisoners. It was actually supposed to last 2 whole weeks, but the psychological effects on the prisoners was so severe that they had to abandon the project after just 6 days. Now this has been a hugely controversial experiment. A lot of people say that it's not even a proper scientific experiment because there was no control group, and the results were never actually even published in a proper medical or scientific journal. Zimbardo published the results in the New York Times magazine. The findings are completely open to interpretation, and there's questions as to whether it was a fair, controlled experiment at all, or Zimbardo just went too far with it. But this experiment has been the basis for many psychology classes, many textbooks. So many things in psychology have been based on this experiment, which nowadays we kind of ask, was it really scientifically valid? So like I said, this was ran by Dr. Philip Zimbardo between the 14th and the 20th of August 1971, and it was funded in full by the US Navy research officers. Zimbardo intended to focus on the power of rules and roles between prisoners and prison guards, and things very, very quickly went south. So Zimbardo had his idea. He knew he wanted to run this experiment, so he puts an ad into the local Stanford newspaper. This was run by the Stanford University. In this ad, he's asking for male volunteers, students. He's offering them $15 a day for this experiment. Nowadays, that $15 would be the equivalent to about $94, so it was quite a decent pay. And he was asking for male students, and male students needed the money. Students who responded were given an extensive questionnaire they had to complete. This was asking questions about family background, physical and mental health history, prior experience with psychology, any criminal history, like anything that was relevant, they asked it. It was a really big questionnaire. And from this questionnaire, they managed to narrow it down, and the people who they were interested in had to have like one-on-one interviews with the experimenters. In the end, they chose 24 men who were considered to be the most stable, and this is also the most mature and the least involved in any antisocial behaviours, and they also displayed no masochistic or sadistic behaviours. These 24 men were randomly split into 2 categories, either prisoners or prison guards, and this was literally completely random at the flip of a coin. So in each category they had 9 men plus 3 potential substitutes. Zimbardo later said that pretty much all of the 24 men actually expressed interest in becoming a prisoner and not a prison guard, and this is because they couldn't ever imagine themselves going through college and ending up as a prison guard, but they could all imagine themselves making some mistake at some point in life and ending up in prison. It's important to note that with the exception of 1 Asian American, these were all middle-class white men of college age. You've got to ask the question, how would the results have differed if there was more diversity here? The experiment was conducted in a 35-foot section of the basement of Stanford University's psychology department called Jordan Hall, and the prison actually had 2 fabricated walls, one at the entrance and one at the cell wall, so people could sort of watch but not be seen. They also had 3 cells. Each cell was 6 foot by 9 foot, and in each cell there was literally just 3 camp beds, and that was it. It was very, very cramped. It had a small corridor which they used as the yard, and a small closet which was their solitary confinement area. The guards, however, were given a completely different environment. They were given a rest and relaxation area where they could go and sit whilst they're waiting to begin their shift or whilst they're on their break. This entire jail set was designed to give feelings of power and powerlessness and oppression and freedom, and they wanted to create this strong divide between the prisoners and the guards. The experiment was also to be largely captured on film. And this is maybe where Zimbardo went wrong. He decides to include himself in the experiment. He makes himself the superintendent of the prison, whilst an undergrad research assistant called David Jaffe, I'm not entirely sure, acted as the warden. So this has been really hugely questioned over the years, because could Zimbardo truly remain impartial if he is involved in it? He himself has said no, he couldn't remain impartial. However, he said he felt he needed to be there personally in order to maintain some level of function in the prison necessary for the results. Each subject was made to sign a contract before they actually started the experiment. The prisoners were guaranteed minimally adequate diet, clothing, housing and medical care. They were to expect little to no privacy, and they were to be filmed as much as the experimenters wanted to film them. Some of their basic civil rights were suspended, but there was absolutely no physical abuse that was going to be allowed. Other than that, they were given very, very little information as to what to actually expect. All that is said in the ad was it was an experiment on prison life, not really exactly what was going to happen. The prisoners were told to be available at their home on the day that the experiment was supposed to start, but other than that they had nothing else. All the prisoners were actually arrested in their homes by real police officers. These police officers come in front of their friends, family, neighbours and arrest them on either burglary or armed robbery. They were thoroughly searched, handcuffed and shoved in the back of a police car. This was the beginning of the sort of dehumanisation of the prisoners. Everyone around them had no idea what was going on, and the prisoners, to be honest, probably didn't really know what was going on either. They knew they were going to be in this experiment on prison life, but how were they to know if the police turning up, these were the real police, were actually arresting them for something? So the police take them to the police department and they do the entire professional thing. They do fingerprints, mugshots, give them ID numbers and everything, and then they blindfold them and put them in a cell. Everyone involved, like the real officers, remained 100% professional throughout the entire thing. Obviously the prisoners were asking the officers questions and the officers just weren't answering anything. So these prisoners really didn't have any clue as to whether this was real or not. They didn't really know what was going on. So once they were blindfolded in the cell, an experimenter and a guard would turn up, pick them up and put them in a car and drive them, still blindfolded, to Stanford University, where they would take them to the makeshift prison in the basement. Once they arrived at Stanford, each prisoner was stripped naked and deloused, and some of the guards at this point already started to sort of make fun of them, sort of make fun of their bodies and things like that. They were made to stand naked and alone in the yard for a while before eventually they were placed in a cell. Even the outfits the prisoners wore were specifically designed to dehumanise the prisoners, and that's a word you're going to hear a lot in this because that was pretty much one of Zimbardo's main aims. He wanted to strip the prisoners of any sense of identity. They were given loose-fitting muslin smocks to wear which had their identification numbers front and back. They were given no underwear, so they were completely naked underneath these smocks, and they had a light chain and a lock around their ankle. And they were also given nylon stockings to go over their head to emulate how most prisons used to buzz cut all of their prisoners. And of course they didn't want to buzz cut all of these students, so they just gave them nylon stockings to put over their heads. The guards, however, had a much easier time of it. The day before the experiment started, they had an orientation session where they were basically given the ground rules. They weren't to physically abuse or touch the prisoners in any way, and they weren't to withhold food and drink, but other than that, pretty much everything else was fair game. They were told they had to be tough. Zimbardo told the guards, you can create feelings of boredom, a sense of fear to some degree. You can create a notion of arbitrariness, that their life is totally controlled by us, by the system, you, me, and they'll have no privacy. We're going to take away their individuality in various ways. The guards' job was to maintain respect and law and order. The guards were given khaki shirts and trousers to wear, which pretty much emulate most prison guards around the country. They were also given mirrored sunglasses to wear, so they couldn't have any kind of eye contact with the prisoners. They had whistles around their necks and were given wooden batons. They also came in to help build the prison, so they had a sense of like ownership, that they had put their own hard work into building it and therefore it was theirs to control however they liked. They were instructed to only refer to prisoners by their identification number. They were not at any point to use their names. Even to this day, when Zimbardo is talking about the prisoners, he doesn't use their real names. He still refers to them by their ID numbers. The prisoners were to either stay in their cells or in the yard day and night. They were not allowed out. The guards were to work 8-hour shifts, so it would be sort of sets of 3 guards at any one time. So 3 would be doing morning, 3 would be doing night, and then 3 would be at home resting. They were allowed to leave the prison and go home and rest like normal prison guards would be able to do. The first day was fairly uneventful. Everyone just sort of fell into their assigned roles. The prisoners did find it funny at first, some of them. They were sort of laughing and giggling because to them it wasn't real, it was just an experiment, and the guards were like trying to snap this out of them. But for the most part, it was just very boring and uneventful. At 2:30 AM on the first night, the guards did their first set of counts. Now, counts was where they would line up all the prisoners in the yard and get them to recite their identification numbers back at them, and sometimes these would go on for literally hours. The guards punishing the prisoners for saying something wrong or something out of time. But this first set of counts, they literally woke the prisoners up by blowing the whistles right in their ears and waking them up at 2:30 AM. Like I said, the first day the prisoners weren't really taking it seriously. They were sort of giggling and laughing. Counts wasn't going like the guards would want it to be, so they were punishing them by making them do push-ups, which you could argue is a physical punishment, but I suppose the superintendent Zimbardo let it slide. By the last day, the counts were like clockwork. It was like military. The prisoners were all saying it in time, kind of like robotic. It was really creepy. On the second day, the prisoners start to revolt, and Zimbardo says this completely took him by surprise because he actually didn't expect anything interesting to happen in this 2 weeks at all. He didn't think there was ever going to be any kind of revolt. He didn't ever expect the results that he got from it. But on the second day, the prisoners decided they'd had enough. The prisoners all removed their stocking caps, they ripped off their numbers, and they barricaded themselves in their cells with their beds, and they wouldn't let the guards in. No matter how much the guards shouted at them and tried to punish them, they just weren't allowed in. The prisoners just had already had enough of being treated like less than human. So the guards had to figure out a way to adequately deal with the rebellion and not use any physical force. And so they call in all of the guards who are at home, the guards who were in the break room resting. They all got together, all 9 of them. They were frustrated that the prisoners were taunting them because prisoners knew they couldn't really use any physical punishment on them. And the morning shift came in and were angry at the night shift for letting them get away with it. They thought they were too lenient. And so everyone was sort of just like getting at each other. So all the guards get together and decide to treat it with force. They take the fire extinguishers, which had to be in there by law, and they start to shoot the foam at the prisoners to get them away from the doors. And once they're away from the doors, they could obviously open it and get in. The guards got into each cell and stripped all of the prisoners naked, completely humiliating them. They removed their beds and put the most like naughty prisoners, the ringleaders, into the solitary confinement closet. But now they had a bit of a problem because it had taken 9 guards to subdue 9 prisoners, and there couldn't be 9 guards on duty at all times. They had to figure out a way to control them. So they decided to start using psychological tactics to control the prisoners instead. They turned one of the cells, I think it was cell 1, into the privilege cell. So the most well-behaved prisoners would go into the privilege cell and they were sort of given preferential treatment. They were given food and water. They were given their uniforms back, they were given their beds, they were allowed to brush their teeth, which actually I find very strange because these are just basic human rights, like being able to brush your teeth, having bed, having clothes. Like, they're just very basic things. However, in this jail, these were like privileged things. And it's worth bearing in mind as well that the experimenters have nothing to do with what the guards are doing. They're pretty much just staying back, even though Zimbardo is a superintendent and one of his undergrad researchers is the warden. They don't have anything to do with it at this point. Everything the guards are doing is off their own backs. They naturally slipped into their own roles. The guards were very good at being authoritative. They knew they had to keep the prisoners down, and the prisoners just fell into this submissive role. They were conforming, they were doing exactly what they thought they should be doing. After about a day, the guards probably get a little bit bored and decide to mix things up again. So they take some of the good prisoners out of the privileged cell, put them in with the bad prisoners, they put the bad prisoners in with the good ones, and this starts to turn all of the prisoners against each other because they think there's some kind of informant, there's a snitch who's like telling the guards things that they want to hear, and therefore all of the prisoners start to distrust one another. And this whole rebellion also caused a further shift in how the guards actually felt, because no longer were they in a simulation, in an experiment where they were supposed to act like guards and these prisoners were supposed to have done something bad. Now in their minds the prisoners had actually disobeyed them, they had actually done something wrong, and therefore the guards had to punish them because they had done something wrong. This caused a complete sort of shift in how their minds were working. Every aspect of the prisoners' lives were up for the guards to decide, including when they got to go to the toilet. And if they didn't want them to go to the toilet, they basically put a bucket in each cell and told them they just had to go in the bucket. So really soon the entire prison started to smell of urine and feces. I can't imagine how disgusting it was. After 10 PM, which was lights out, the prisoners were not allowed out of their cell for anything, including going to the toilet. So they would have to use this bucket. And if the guards were feeling particularly mean, they wouldn't even let them clean the buckets out in the morning. They would just sit there festering. Of course, some of the guards fell into this role more easily than others. Some of them were taking away mattresses, making them sleep on the cold concrete floor. They were degrading and they were sort of making fun of the prisoners. And experimenters later said that actually 1/3 of the guards, so 3 out of 9, displayed genuine sadistic tendencies, which they had never showed beforehand. This is something they made sure that they weren't showing beforehand. None of these were sadistic men in any way, or at least so they thought, but now they were. However, not all guards fell so easily into this role. There were some guards who struggled to become authoritative, and so the warden took one particular guard aside and told him that he needs to be more tough. But this kind of goes against the entire point of the experiment, in which it's to see what they would do given not much sort of direction. And so by him taking him aside and being like, you need to be more tough, you need to put your foot down with these like prisoners, it completely changes the course of the experiment. This particular guard felt uncomfortable sort of being horrible to the prisoners. He refused to get involved with counts, which were progressively getting longer and longer and just more horrible to be around. And he would sort of sit outside, and the warden said that he would go and sit with him, but he shouldn't have done that because it showed him that it was alright to sit out when really he needed to be there. All the guards were told to be tough before they went in. That was sort of like part of their guidelines. But if they went in and they weren't being tough, then they should have just left it there. Like, that was how they naturally were. They naturally weren't sadistic and mean and tough. Now, prisoner number 5401 was perceived to be the leader of the sort of rebellion, and so they regulated when he could smoke. They sort of said, nope, you can't smoke at this time, you can only smoke at this time. And they made his life particularly really tough. And this is the same prisoner who was actually a self-styled radical activist. He was well known on the campus for being like very radical. He fought for what he believed in, and the only reason he actually took part in the sort of experiment was because he wanted to do sort of an expose on it, because he thought it was the university trying to figure out how to control radical students. He didn't for a second think it was actually a study on prison life. So this just goes to show how little the prisoners actually knew beforehand, how they didn't have a clue what they were letting themselves in for. Less than 36 hours in, another prisoner, who was prisoner number 8612, or Douglas Corpy was his real name, started to suffer from some kind of mental breakdown. He absolutely lost it, and this was only 36 hours in. He's acting completely crazy, he's screaming at prisoners and guards, he is crying uncontrollably. He just is so angry, his thinking is disorganised, he just has a complete meltdown. And at first the experimenters didn't believe him, they thought he was just trying to get out of the experiment, and so they just didn't really do anything. I think a doctor saw him and they just let him carry on. However, eventually it got so bad the experimenters had to let him out. Like, this was a case of like mental health, and he was really ill, it seemed. However, Douglas Corpy later said that he was actually acting all of it, and that anybody, any trained medical professional could see that he was acting it. He said that he was in the middle of studying for exams and didn't want to be there anymore, and so faked the mental breakdown so he could get out and continue studying. But Zimbardo has said that he knows for a fact that it was real. There was no way that he faked it. and he said that Douglas was just so embarrassed afterwards that he made up a story about studying so people wouldn't kind of bring it up anymore. Prisoners have since said that they begged to go home throughout the experiment. They didn't want to be there anymore. It was a really horrible experience for them, but they were refused. Like, nobody would let them out, and so at this point it begins to feel like an actual prison. They can't escape. Like, what's the difference between this and the real prison? There was one prisoner, a man called Richard Yako, who said he asked a staff member to leave on the second day. He'd had enough, and they were point blank told no. Another prisoner called Chris Ramsey had a similar experience and was told no, and so went on a hunger strike, and they still wouldn't let him out. Zimbardo was captured on film saying that the only way they could leave was under medical or psychiatric help, as in they had to be like physically or mentally ill to be let out, otherwise there was no escape. Zimbardo has since denied saying this. He said there was an explicit sort of phrase that they had to say if they wanted to get out, and this phrase was sort of specified in the contract, and this phrase was "I quit the experiment." Most of these people who were asking to leave were saying like, "I want to go home, I want my mum." Nobody ever said "I quit the experiment." However, you can actually view the contracts on his website, it seems, and you can't see this specified anywhere. Some of the prisoners actually later questioned why they never filed any false imprisonment charges, because they're sure that this was illegal. On the third day, they held a visiting hour for friends and family to sort of up the morale of the prisoners, who were all seemingly wanting to leave for some strange reason. And weirdly enough, even the visitors complied with all the fake rules and regulations of this prison. Before all of the friends and family arrived, they actually cleaned the prison. They sort of let all the prisoners shave and have a wash so they didn't look so awful. So they sort of like put on this complete face for all the friends and family. The friends and family had to come and they had to register, and then they had to wait for half an hour before they went in to see the superintendent or the warden, and they had to like look at the prisoners' cases with the warden, and only 2 visitors could see one prisoner for 10 minutes under the close watch of a guard. And everyone completely complied with this. Everyone waited the half an hour, everyone signed in. Like, even though this was a simulated prison, everyone treated it like it was a real one, even external visitors. Some parents got distressed when they saw the kind of situation that their sons were in, saw how bad they were mentally and physically as well. Even though this was only 3 days in, it was obviously taking a toll on their appearance. One set of parents actually went to the superintendent, to Zimbardo, and said about their concerns, and Zimbardo turned it around on the parents and sort of said, well, your son doesn't sleep well, don't you think the boy can handle it? And so strangely, the dad's response to this was, of course he can handle it, he's a real tough kid, he's a leader. So he's seen his kid in actual distress in this prison. He's probably said like what's going on, how he doesn't want to be there anymore. And the dad is so scared of his son's masculinity being diminished by Zimbardo saying like, oh, don't you think he can handle it, he's a man, that the dad actually turns around and is like, no, yeah, he can handle it, he's a man, he's a leader, he can do it. What? So scared of your son being perceived as weak that you leave him in this situation. It is mind-blowing. The next day, Zimbardo calls in a Catholic priest to come in and talk to the prisoners and have a look around as well to assess the conditions, because this priest goes to a lot of different prisons and Zimbardo wanted to make sure that it was as accurate as possible. Interestingly, when all of the prisoners introduced themselves to the priest, only a few days in, they all introduced themselves by their identification number and not their real name. The priest even offers legal help to all of the prisoners, and they actually accept it, even though they're not in any legal trouble at all, but they've become so sort of indoctrinated by this experiment that they think the only way they're going to get out is with legal help, with a lawyer. There was one prisoner, number 819, who refused to meet with the priest. He was in a really bad condition. He was feeling sick and was refusing to drink and eat. So Zimbardo lets this prisoner go and sit in a side room to rest. And while Zimbardo does this, the guards line up the rest of the prisoners and start a chant saying, prisoner number 819 is a bad prisoner. Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner, over and over and over again. And when Zimbardo realises that 819 can hear this going on, he goes into the room and finds him on the floor sobbing uncontrollably. And Zimbardo says like, listen, this is an experiment, I'm not a superintendent, I am an experimenter, this is an experiment, this is not a real jail, like, do you want to go home? And 819 actually says, no, I want to go back, because they all think I'm a bad prisoner. That same day, the guards began to hear rumours of a planned breakout. They thought the first prisoner that had been let out, number 8612, Douglas Corpy, had been talking with his friends outside the prison, and they were all planning to come in and break everyone out. And Zimbardo will not allow this to happen. So they actually disassemble the entire prison and take up to the 5th floor. They take all of the prisoners up there, blindfolded and chained together. They all go up there and sit in a dark room in silence while Zimbardo waits in the basement on his own. He doesn't just sit by and observe the behaviour. He gets like personally, I feel like offended isn't the right word, but he feels personally affected by this planned potential breakout, and so he waits for somebody to turn up, and they never ever do. But before they moved all the prisoners up to the 5th floor, they had another plan in which Zimbardo actually called the police department, the real police department, and asked them to get involved to protect the prison, and they were like, no, like we don't have the insurance to do that. This is an experiment, like we can't get involved. And so at that point Zimbardo's like, yeah, move everyone, I'll deal with this myself. On the 5th day, all the prisoners were brought in front of a parole board. This parole board was mostly made up of students from the university. Basically, these students said to the prisoners one by one in this parole meeting, would you forgo all of the money you've earned if we let you out right now? Bear in mind, this is quite a decent amount of money, but at this point they would have earned nearly $400. And pretty much all of the prisoners said yes, like, if you let us out right now, I don't want any of the money, just let me out. However, then after this, they all just went back to their cells. They didn't fight to be let out. They didn't say like, I quit the experiment at any point. They still just went back to their cells and stayed in silence, as they should have done. The prisoners no longer viewed it as an experiment. They were having parole meetings, they were talking about getting lawyers, they didn't think of it as an experiment anymore. This was real, and the only way they could get out was by going to parole meetings. And then day 6 comes, the last day of the experiment. Now, like I said, it was meant to last 2 weeks. On day 6, it ends because Zimbardo's girlfriend, or who is now his wife, they actually ended up getting married a year later, and Professor Christina Maslach visits the jail. Now, she is also a psychology professor. She knows the basis of what Zimbardo's doing. She's obviously been hearing about it from him, but she says when she went into that prison, she felt sick to her stomach. Like, she flinched at the first sight of all the prisoners. They looked so awful. She said years later, at this point I felt there was something wrong with me, thinking, here I am, I'm supposed to be a psychologist, I'm supposed to understand. And I was having a hard time watching what was happening to these kids. She hadn't been there since day 1. She hadn't become desensitized to what she was seeing, like the superintendent and like the warden, who were supposed to be experimenters but now found themselves in the center of this experiment. She came in the midst of what was going on and knew that this was inhumane treatment. She said she spoke to one guard who was absolutely lovely. He was polite and charming. But then later on saw the same guy talking to the prisoners, and it was like Jekyll and Hyde. He was being so cruel and so tough, not treating them like they were human. This actual particular guard was actually known as John Wayne because of the way he treated everyone. And he later said that he treated them how he thought that the experimenters wanted him to treat them. He was just living up to the role and doing what he thought he should be doing. He wasn't actually a cruel person. And this is shown by the fact that he was absolutely lovely to Christina. This was just such a Jekyll and Hyde moment. This wasn't people acting how they would naturally act, they were acting how they thought they should act. After they left, Zimbardo asked Christina what she thought of the experiment, and he expected them to have some sort of like intellectual conversation about it, and Christina just broke down. She starts screaming at him, yelling, saying like he needs to end this right now, like this isn't right. And so Zimbardo is taken aback but thinks about it and realises like, yeah, this is time for this to end. About 50 external people had come into the prison to see what it was like in the few days, and Christina was the only one who actually had the guts to turn around and be like, this isn't right. Or maybe it's not even that she had the guts, maybe she's the only person who actually had the moral compass to know that it wasn't right. Zimbardo also said that another reason he ended it is because he had seen on tape the guards being really, really horrible to the prisoners in the middle of the night when they thought they weren't being watched. Like, they were being horrible. I don't know if they had actually broken the rule about no physical punishment because it didn't actually specify exactly what the guards were doing, but Zimbardo said it was so horrific that he just knew he needed to end it. And so on the 20th of August 1971, the experiment ends after 6 days. Zimbardo said there were 3 types of guards who he saw in this experiment. that the ones who were tough and fair, who followed the rules, did what they should have been doing. There were the good guys who were quiet and didn't like to give out punishments. And then there were the sadistic ones, the ones who are unnecessarily cruel and tough. The prisoners also coped in different ways. On the first day they thought it was a joke, they knew it was an experiment, so they messed around, they were laughing. But very, very quickly they began to fall into line. They realised that this wasn't a joke and this became an actual prison for them. 4 prisoners had emotional breakdowns. One of them actually suffered with a psychosomatic rash over his entire body. This actually had physical symptoms. Some prisoners did everything they could to behave. They were like the model prisoners. They did not want to get in trouble at all. Prisoners reported losing their entire sense of identity. They became their ID numbers, and some even reported suffering PTSD-like symptoms afterwards. One prisoner went on to earn a doctorate in clinical psychology, and he now works in San Francisco jails working with the prisoners. Obviously, Zimbardo received a lot of backlash for this experiment, and people were questioning the ethics of him getting involved, let alone the ethics of the experiment as a whole. To remain truly impartial, he should have just stayed away, and that's by his own admission. He admits that he got too close. Zimbardo eventually had to concede that his scientific experiment wasn't an experiment at all. It was actually more of a demonstration of human psychology. And it was also a demonstration of aggression in prisons. There was no control group to compare the results to, maybe a control group when the guards weren't given any direction at all. That could be very interesting. And the sample size is actually too small for extrapolation, meaning that you can't get a proper scientific result from just a group of 24 middle-class 20-year-old white men. Since this experiment, and actually because of this experiment, ethical guidelines have been introduced to control experiments containing human subjects, meaning that now scientists have to consider if the benefit to science outweighs the harm they could do to their human subjects. Essentially, Zimbardo said that the experiment showed what he intended it to show. It showed that authoritarian figures who are overly harsh and mean lead to more obedient, submissive subjects. He wanted it to lead to an overhaul in how prisons are run, especially in the US, which at this time, and some may argue still today, do not treat their subjects, do not treat their prisoners humanely. He says that all prisons are social experiments to some extent, and that the public remain passive bystanders to this. I mean, this is very interesting and could be a whole video on its own, which I probably will never do. But look at the difference between prisons in the US, for example, and Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian prisons arguably treat their prisoners like human beings. They give them rehab, they show them how to overhaul their lives, and they have such a small percentage of returns to prison. Like in Scandinavia, pretty much when somebody leaves prison, they're never coming back. So then you've got to compare that to the US, where a lot of people are just returning to prison again and again and again. Why is that? Maybe the conclusion isn't really scientifically valid, but it does show an interesting side to human psychology. Some people, regardless of their usual behaviour, can become hostile and abusive given that amount of power. Very interestingly, in 2002, the BBC actually conducted a really similar study, which was called the BBC Prison Study, and the results were published in 2006, and they were drastically different to the Stanford prison experiment. The BBC experiment basically showed that it all filters down from the top. If there's nobody controlling the guards, then they will act however they want to act. But if the guards are being held responsible for their actions by a higher figure, by a warden, by a superintendent, then they will act accordingly to that. So if the higher powers hold people responsible for their actions, that all filters down, and therefore the prisoners are treated more humanely because the guards actually have consequences for their actions. In the Stanford prison experiment, the guards didn't have any consequences. They were allowed to act however they wanted to act because they knew there'd be no repercussions. And then of course this affects how the prisoners act as well. I think I'm going to end this here because otherwise this could become a never-ending black hole, but I can't wait to hear what all of you guys think about this. Do you have any other facts about the Stanford prison experiment that maybe I haven't mentioned? Put them all in the comments and let me know if you like this or any other experiments like this that you'd like to see me talk about. And I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.